They thought the story was already over. The room was cold. The air felt heavy, like even breathing took effort. Iron chains clinked softly with every small movement, echoing through the silent hall. In the center of it all stood Bruce Lee, not as a legend, not as a master, but as a prisoner. To them, he was just another captured man, hands bound, shoulders weighed down by metal, surrounded by guards who believed power came from numbers, uniforms, and fear. They saw the chains and assumed the fight was finished before it even began. Their eyes were filled with confidence, not the kind earned through skill, but the kind that comes from thinking you already control the outcome. They whispered. They laughed. Some didn't even bother to look directly at him. In their minds, Bruce Lee was no longer a threat. He was a symbol of defeat, a man reduced to silence. But what they didn't understand was that silence was never weakness for him. Inside those chains, something dangerous was happening, something invisible. His breathing was slow, calm, controlled, every breath steady, like the quiet before a storm. His eyes were not filled with fear. They were focused, a focus that came from years of discipline, pain, and mastery. They mistook stillness for surrender. They mistook calm for collapse. They mistook chains for control. The guards believed the metal around his wrists meant ownership over his body. They believed that once a man is bound, his spirit is bound too. That once a man is captured, his will disappears. But Bruce Lee was never just a body. He was training in his mind while standing still, feeling every link of the chain, measuring every sound, studying every step, every breath, every weakness around him. What looked like defeat was actually preparation. They thought they had taken everything from him. They were wrong. They had only taken away what they could see. What they could never touch was what made him dangerous. Because legends are not created when things are easy. Legends are revealed when everything is taken away. And in that cold room, in those heavy chains, they were not looking at a defeated man. They were standing in front of something they did not understand, something they were not ready for. They had made a grave mistake. The guards, confident and sneering, were so certain of their victory that they didn't notice the subtle changes in the room. A shift in the air, the faint tightening of Bruce Lee's fists beneath the cold steel of the chains. The way his eyes flicked, calculating, measuring, not in panic but in precision. Every second that passed, their confidence grew. They laughed louder. They gestured carelessly. Some leaned too close, thinking he was nothing more than a restrained prisoner. The irony was almost cruel. The more they celebrated their control, the deeper he delved into the storm brewing inside him. It started in the small things. A twitch of finger, a movement of his shoulders that seemed insignificant but held an entire universe of power. The chains rattled subtly, not with fear, but with tension. He wasn't resisting. He wasn't struggling. He was preparing. And then it happened. A guard reached forward, mocking, to push him down. A foolish move. A single spark in the darkness. In that moment, Bruce Lee's calm shattered the illusion of his captivity. He didn't scream. He didn't roar. He simply moved. Time seemed to stretch. Every eye in the room locked onto him, disbelief spreading like wildfire. The chains rattled violently as he twisted with the elegance of a predator and the precision of a master. The guards froze because in that instant their world changed. The man they thought broken, helpless, and restrained was alive with force beyond imagination. One guard lunged. Bruce's reflexes were instantaneous. A movement so fluid, so perfectly timed, that it looked almost supernatural. The guard's own momentum betrayed him, and in a single motion, he was off balance, incapacitated, staring at Bruce with a mixture of fear and awe. Another tried to intervene, swinging recklessly. But Bruce was already elsewhere, a blur of motion, eyes calm, muscles coiled and released with perfect control. Each strike wasn't just a movement. It was a statement. Chains clanged, metal groaned, but Bruce Lee's power wasn't confined by steel. Every chain that bound him only amplified the precision and intensity of his technique. The room, once dominated by fear and arrogance, was now a stage for something far greater. Bruce Lee wasn't just fighting to escape. He was rewriting the rules of what was possible in that space. The guards had relied on numbers and weapons, on the illusion that physical dominance equaled victory. But Bruce relied on mastery, timing, and instinct, forces they could never predict, never defend against. Every movement he made told a story of discipline, of pain, of years spent honing a body and mind into something unstoppable. Every strike reminded the captors of a terrifying truth. Power is not measured by chains or weapons, but by the will behind every action. By the time the first wave of disbelief turned to chaos, Bruce Lee had already transformed the battlefield. What was meant to be a scene of control and humiliation became a whirlwind of precision and unstoppable force. The guards, once brimming with confidence, were now scrambling, their overconfidence replaced with fear they couldn't articulate. And yet, even in this moment of total dominance, there was an eerie calm in him. A predator doesn't scream when it hunts. It waits, it calculates, and then it strikes perfectly. They had underestimated him. They had mocked him. They had chained him. And that mistake was their undoing. Because a legend doesn't break, it awakens. Even as the chaos erupted around him, Bruce Lee's mind was calm. The room, once filled with arrogant shouts and mocking laughter, now trembled under the force of his movements. Every step he took was deliberate, every strike measured, every breath controlled. But beneath that surface of precision, there was something deeper, something that could not be chained, caged, or restrained. Fear. Not his own. He didn't feel fear, but he could sense it in every face around him. The guards' confidence, their pride, their laughter, all of it was gone. In its place was hesitation, panic, the realization that they had underestimated him. And yet, Bruce didn't relish their fear. He was not cruel. He was focused. Every movement he made was a testament to mastery, not malice. He remembered every lesson, every training session, every moment of sweat, pain, and discipline. The countless hours when his body had screamed to stop, when the world seemed unbearable, and yet he had pushed beyond. It all converged in this instant. A prisoner no longer, but a force awakened. Chains rattled with each motion, but they were no longer shackles. They were extensions of his power, tools he manipulated with precision. The weight that had once confined him now amplified his speed, his balance, his ability to dominate the room. Each link of metal was transformed into part of his rhythm, part of the symphony of movement that he conducted flawlessly. One guard attempted to strike, desperately swinging his weapon. Another lunged from behind, hoping to catch him off guard. But Bruce's awareness was beyond comprehension. His eyes, calm and calculating, scanned everything at once. The position of each opponent, the angles, the timing, the weaknesses in their stance. In the blink of an eye, the first guard stumbled, disarmed, humiliated, while the second was redirected with a motion so fluid it seemed unreal. And then came the moment that defined him. Time slowed, not in the way one imagines, not with cinematic effects or exaggeration, but in the clarity of instinct and pure awareness. Every sound, every vibration in the floor, every subtle movement became a signal. Every chain, every muscle, every breath was aligned perfectly. He moved like water, strikes flowing seamlessly into one another. No wasted energy, no hesitation. In that moment, Bruce Lee became more than a fighter. He became a story, a living testament to the human spirit. The fear, the oppression, the chains, the doubt, all of it was irrelevant now. He was unstoppable because he was free, not just physically, but mentally and spiritually. The remaining guards faltered, their eyes wide with disbelief. They had counted on physical dominance, numbers, intimidation. They had assumed that breaking the body would break the spirit. And now they realized the tragic truth. You can break the body, but the spirit of a legend cannot be contained. Every motion Bruce made carried history. Every block, every strike, every maneuver spoke of decades of dedication. And it wasn't just technique, it was the energy behind it, the life force that refused to bow, the courage that no chain could suppress. And yet, Even as he stood victorious, something extraordinary lingered in his gaze. A calmness, a discipline, a reminder that true strength does not come from defeating others, but from mastering oneself. The guards, once laughing, now lay scattered, bewildered and terrified, but Bruce didn't gloat. He simply exhaled, the sound echoing like a quiet thunder through the hall. He had been captured, he had been chained, and he had been underestimated. But now, in the aftermath, one thing was crystal clear. Legends rise not from comfort. Legends rise not from easy victories. Legends rise when the world believes they are broken, and then proves it utterly, completely, and inevitably wrong. And in this moment, Bruce Lee was no longer a man in chains. He was a force that would never be forgotten. Even as the echoes of clashing chains and scattered footsteps faded, the air in the room was far from calm. Something lingered, an invisible weight, a quiet storm that none of the guards could comprehend. They had seen Bruce Lee move, strike, and dominate, yet the feeling was unsettling, as if the true depth of his power had not yet been revealed. Bruce stood in the center, chains still rattling, sweat glistening on his forehead, his chest rising and falling in perfect rhythm. His eyes, sharp and unwavering, scanned the room, not in panic, not in aggression, but in anticipation. There was a quiet certainty in him, the kind that only comes from absolute mastery over body, mind, and spirit, and it terrified those who watched. The guards exchanged nervous glances. Their confusion was palpable. They had survived moments of combat before, seen skilled fighters and deadly martial artists. But this was something different. Every motion Bruce had made wasn't just strength. It was intelligence. It was precision. It was a demonstration of control over forces they could neither predict nor defend against. One of the younger guards, trembling, whispered to another, I think he's planning something else, something worse." The other scoffed, trying to appear brave, but the fear in his voice betrayed him. And he wasn't wrong. There was a tension in the room, almost tangible, as if Bruce Lee were a coiled spring, ready to unleash a force that went far beyond what anyone could imagine. Bruce didn't speak. He didn't need to. His silence carried meaning. It was in the stillness of his stance, the quiet focus in his gaze, the way his fingers flexed around the cold metal of chains. Each subtle movement was deliberate, almost ritualistic, as if he were drawing energy from the environment itself, from the walls, the air, the floor beneath his feet. Time seemed to stretch. Every second felt like a lifetime to the guards. Every clink of the chains, every subtle movement of Bruce's body amplified the fear and anticipation in the room. They didn't realize that what they had already witnessed, his speed, his power, his precision, was only the beginning. What was coming next was something far more devastating, something calculated, something inevitable that Bruce's breathing remained slow and controlled. But inside, a storm was building. He was no longer reacting. He was preparing. Every glance, every shift in his weight, every micro-adjustment of his stance was part of a larger plan, invisible to those who had underestimated him. The guards tried to regroup, forming defensive lines and gripping their weapons tighter. But Bruce wasn't concerned with their formations. He didn't need to see every move before it happened. He could feel it. He could sense weaknesses, predict patterns, and exploit the tiniest mistakes. It was as if the chains themselves were teaching him, guiding him, amplifying his instincts. And then, almost imperceptibly, his lips curved into the faintest smirk. Not a smile of arrogance, but a smile that carried inevitability. A silent message to all who dared challenge him. You have no idea what's coming. Every eye in the room was drawn to him. Every thought among the captors raced. Could a man in chains really have more power than they could imagine? Could their numbers, their weapons, their training truly matter against someone who had transcended both fear and restraint? The air thickened with tension. Every heartbeat was a countdown. Every breath was a warning. And yet, Bruce remained serene, as though he had already crossed the line between danger and destiny. What the guards did not know, could not know, was that the moment of true unleashing was approaching. A moment that would shatter all expectations, defy every assumption, and reveal a power so pure and precise that it would leave no doubt. Bruce Lee in chains was not a prisoner. He was the inevitable force of nature itself. And in that quiet, charged moment, a question lingered in every mind. When he moves again, what will survive? And then it happened. The calm before the storm shattered. Bruce Lee's focus snapped in motion like lightning striking the earth. The chains that had once bound him became extensions of his power. Every link a weapon, every clink a signal of impending fury. The guards, still frozen in disbelief, barely had time to react. Time seemed to dilate. Every strike, every pivot, every dodge unfolded in perfect harmony. One moment, Bruce's foot was planted firmly on the ground. The next, he was a blur, moving with a speed that made eyes water. The room was filled with the sound of metal meeting metal, boots skidding on the floor, and the whispers of fear escaping the mouths of those who had once laughed. He struck with precision. Every movement was intentional. The first guard lunged, and Bruce countered effortlessly, redirecting his momentum with a single motion of his wrist. The chain he held rattled and spun, not as a hindrance, but as a weapon that struck with lethal elegance. The guard fell to the floor, stunned, unable to comprehend what had just happened. Another guard swung wildly, desperate to regain control. Bruce shifted with the fluidity of water, ducking, spinning, and launching forward in one seamless motion. His fists moved faster than the eye could track. Each strike landed with exacting force, each block deflecting attacks that seemed inevitable. The chains around his wrists danced with him, wrapping and unwrapping in rhythm with his mastery, creating a spectacle of martial precision and sheer power. But it wasn't just physical domination. Every movement carried intention. Every strike carried a lesson. The guards realized too late that they were not facing a man in chains. They were facing a living embodiment of discipline, strategy, and pure instinct. Their arrogance, their overconfidence, their belief in numbers and weapons alone had blinded them to a truth far more terrifying. Bruce Lee's mind was untouchable, his spirit unbreakable. He moved through the room like a force of nature. Each step was measured, each pivot precise. The chains clanged against the floor and walls, echoing like thunder, yet he never faltered. Every motion seemed impossible, yet every motion was perfectly calculated. He was not reacting. He was controlling the room, controlling the tempo, controlling every thought of those who had dared to chain him. A guard tried to flank him, thinking cunning could overcome skill. But Bruce anticipated the attack, stepping lightly, spinning, and redirecting the man's energy back against him. Another was disarmed with a swift strike, the chain snapping taut before releasing, propelling his opponent backward without effort. The room became a storm of motion, chaotic to the untrained eye, yet orchestrated with the precision of a master composer. And yet, amidst all the fury, there was clarity. Bruce Lee's eyes scanned, calculated, and adapted in an instant. Every attack, every defense, every movement was a statement. He was not a prisoner, he was a force beyond comprehension. The chains that bound him were no longer chains. They were an extension of his will, a physical manifestation of decades of discipline, training, and indomitable spirit. The guards' fear had reached its peak. Their arrogance shattered, their confidence erased. And in that turning moment, they understood a devastating truth. Power cannot be measured by chains, weapons, or numbers. True power lives in the mind, the body, and the spirit, and Bruce Lee had mastered all three. By the time the last guard realized the fight was lost, Bruce had already moved past them. Every chain, every strike, every controlled movement left an impression not just on the room, but on the very memory of those who survived. They would never forget. They would never underestimate again. And Bruce? He paused for a heartbeat, still in the center of the chaos, breathing calmly, every muscle coiled and relaxed at the same time. He had turned the tide. He had seized the moment. The turning point was not just victory. It was the revelation that nothing could contain him. Chains could bind his body, but they could never bind his legend. The room fell into a tense silence. Every guard still standing was frozen, their eyes wide, their hearts hammering in their chests. Bruce Lee, at the center, breathed slowly, methodically, as though the chaos surrounding him didn't exist. The clatter of broken weapons and scattered chains echoed faintly, but it no longer carried the sense of urgency it once did. This was the calm after the first storm, and the calm that precedes the true storm. Bruce's gaze swept across the room. He didn't look angry. He didn't look vengeful. He looked inevitable. Every subtle movement of his shoulders, every slight adjustment of his stance, signaled that something monumental was about to happen, something the guards could neither predict nor survive. They had witnessed strength, speed, precision. They had seen him break free from chains, disarm multiple attackers, and dominate the room with a force that defied belief. Yet, deep down, they instinctively knew they hadn't seen the full measure of his power. It was in the pauses, the slight flex of his fingers, the way he controlled his breathing, the faint smile that barely touched his lips. Those small, deliberate motions told a story. He was not done, not even close. Bruce was preparing for the ultimate demonstration, the one that would leave an indelible mark, not only on the surviving guards, but on the very memory of that place. Every step he had taken, every strike he had made, had been leading to this moment. Every chain that had confined him now amplified his presence, each clink a signal of imminent mastery. And yet, what made it terrifying wasn't just the physicality. It was the mental edge. The guards had relied on intimidation, weapons, and numbers. Bruce relied on something far more potent: understanding, anticipation, and instinct honed to perfection. Every twitch of muscle, every micro shift of his stance, every glance across the room was part of a calculation they could never hope to match. A younger guard whispered, almost involuntarily, He's not human." No one corrected him. No one dared. There was a shared, unspoken realization that what they had faced so far was only a glimpse. The chains that had once symbolized captivity now seemed like part of a ritual, a transformation. Bruce Lee was evolving in real time, and with each breath, each subtle movement, the room grew heavier with anticipation. Bruce's mind, calm and unyielding, recalled every lesson, every failure, every triumph. The chains, the confinement, the humiliation, they were all catalysts, sharpening his focus, heightening his awareness, fueling the energy that would soon be unleashed. It was a preparation invisible to the eye, a tension that stretched every nerve in the room to its limit. He shifted slightly. The guards noticed it, but only as a vague movement. Too late. Their attention was scattered. Their confidence shattered. They did not yet see the speed, the precision, the inevitability that was about to strike. Because Bruce Lee was not simply about to fight. He was about to demonstrate the impossible. Every strike, every movement, every pivot in the next moments would not just defeat his opponents. It would redefine what they believed about skill, strength, and human potential. The atmosphere was thick with suspense. Every eye followed his slightest motion. Every heartbeat counted. Every breath was a silent countdown to the inevitable. The moment was close, closer than anyone dared imagine. The payoff was imminent, and Bruce, standing amidst the remnants of chaos, remained perfectly still, calm, focused, unyielding. A predator in human form, coiled and waiting. The chains glinted in the dim light, reflecting not imprisonment, but power contained, ready to explode. The guards could feel it. The tension, the certainty, the invisible force pressing against them, warning them that this was the final threshold. One wrong move, one misstep, and the legend before them would complete his inevitable demonstration. It was more than action, more than skill. It was the promise of what happens when mastery meets inevitability, when a man in chains becomes the unstoppable force. And in that moment, every survivor knew the truth. The true payoff had not yet arrived. But when it did, nothing would ever be the same. The room held its breath. Every guard who remained standing stared in disbelief, their minds struggling to process what they had already witnessed and what they were about to witness next. Bruce Lee, still bound by chains, stood at the center, the calm in his gaze almost unbearable. He had already moved faster than they could track, struck harder than they could resist, and dominated the room beyond their comprehension. Yet even now, they felt a surge of anticipation, as if the true extent of his power had not yet been revealed. And they were right. In a heartbeat, Bruce shifted. The chains around his wrists rattled, but they no longer felt like confinement. They were extensions of his body, instruments of precision, amplifiers of speed and force. His legs moved with the coiled tension of a predator. Every muscle, every sinew, every breath was focused, centered, and ready. Then, without warning, he struck, not with reckless fury, but with surgical precision. A guard lunged forward, and in a movement almost imperceptible, Bruce redirected him, using the man's own momentum to send him crashing into the wall. Another attempted to flank him, but the chains wrapped and unwrapped with lightning speed, sweeping through the air like a whip, disabling his attack before it could land. Every motion was fluid, unstoppable, perfect. The room became a blur of motion, but Bruce remained the calm, eye in the center of the storm. The guards were no longer just opponents. They were participants in a lesson in mastery. Every strike, every block, every step was a demonstration of discipline, skill, and the sheer inevitability of his power. And then the moment came. Bruce Lee paused, a subtle, almost imperceptible pause, a silence so complete it seemed unnatural. The guards froze mid-motion, hearts hammering, eyes wide, bodies tense. They knew instinctively something monumental was about to happen, something no one could have predicted. And then he moved again, faster than thought, sharper than steel. His chains a blur, his fists a storm. The final sequence was a dance of inevitability, a display of skill that transcended human limits. One by one, the remaining guards fell, disarmed, incapacitated, unable to comprehend what had just occurred. The room was filled with the sound of chains clinking, bodies collapsing, and the faint hum of anticipation finally released. Bruce Lee stood in the center, chains glinting, breathing calm and measured. He did not shout. He did not boast. He merely looked around at the chaos he had orchestrated with elegance and control. His eyes met each surviving guard's gaze, silently communicating a single truth. They had underestimated him, and that mistake would follow them forever. And yet, even in this victorious moment, there was no finality, no sense of closure, because legends, by their nature, do not simply finish a fight. They leave a lingering question in the minds of all who witness them, a question that would haunt the guards, the audience, and anyone who heard of this event. What happens next when a man like Bruce Lee is truly unleashed? He had broken free. He had defeated all opposition. But the story was not over. The chains, once symbols of imprisonment, now gleamed like trophies of inevitability. Every movement, every breath, every glance was a promise. The legend of Bruce Lee was far from finished. And in that charged silence, the final truth struck. The moment they thought it was over was never the end. The real legend had only just begun. The room held its breath. The world waited. And Bruce Lee simply smiled.